They say if you want to know what someone truly values, you don't listen to what they say, you look at where their money goes. Well, it's the exact same for a country. And today, we're digging into the U.S. federal budget, which tells two completely different stories. One about massive spending on defense, and another about our investment in public health.
All right, here's the game plan. First, we're going to look at our national priorities by following the money. Then, we'll compare what we invest in our health to the wild world of defense accounting. After that, we'll see the real price of failure, hear a pretty famous warning from a U.S. president, and wrap it all up by talking about something called opportunity cost.
So to really get a handle on what a nation cares about, you've got to follow the money. The federal budget, it just lays it all out there. The choices we're making, the things we're funding, and when you start looking at the numbers, wow, they are just staggering.
To give you a sense of scale, just wrap your head around this number. $1.7 trillion. That's not the whole defense budget. Nope. That's the estimated lifetime cost for just one weapons program, the F-35 fighter jet. Just keep that number in your back pocket.
Okay, so let's flip the coin. Let's look at a completely different part of the budget. This is the section that's all about the health and well-being of everyday Americans, and it's run by the Department of Health and Human Services, or HHS.
So for fiscal year 2025, the proposed discretionary budget for HHS is a little over $122 billion. Now, that's the money Congress gets to decide on every year for things we all depend on, like cutting-edge medical research, childcare, and mental health support.
And these numbers aren't just, ink on a page. This is real stuff. We're talking a $2.3 billion increase for childcare, which is a huge deal for working families. It's another $2 billion for the National Institutes of Health to chase down cures for diseases like Alzheimer's and to really get serious about our mental health crisis. These are investments directly in people.
Okay, now let's pivot to the Department of Defense, and, well, it's a whole different ballgame. While HHS is detailing its investments down to the dollar, the Pentagon is struggling with something much more basic, just accounting for its money.
With a budget that is just astronomically larger than HHS's, this isn't a small question. It's about being accountable to the very taxpayers who are footing the bill. So, can they do it? Well, the official record is a resounding no.
That's right, 8. For 8 years in a row, the Department of Defense has failed its audit. And we're not talking about a bad grade. The auditors literally say the books are in such bad shape, they can't even form an opinion. It's an F every single year since audits became mandatory.
And here's just how big the problem is. This isn't like losing track of a few paper clips. We are talking about the Pentagon not being able to properly account for 63% of its $3.8 trillion in assets. That's more than $2 trillion in gear, buildings, and weapons that they can't fully track. It's just gone from the books.
So you might be thinking, okay, bad accounting, what's the big deal? Well, this is where it gets really painful, because this isn't just a paperwork problem. This failure to track money leads to absolutely staggering amounts of real-world waste on military programs that are, to put it nicely, total duds.
The list of expensive flops is just long. We already mentioned the F-35's $1.7 trillion price tag. But then you've got stuff like the Zumwalt-class destroyer. They wanted 32 of them, but costs went so crazy they only built 3. Or how about the $5 billion spent on a new camouflage pattern that turned out to be basically useless in Afghanistan?
And some of these programs, they became almost infamous. The Littoral Combat Ship cost $30 billion and was so full of problems, we're talking cracking holes and broken weapons, that sailors started calling it the Little Crappy Ship. Now it's being retired decades early. So, you have to ask yourself, right? How does this keep happening? To really get to the root of it, we have to rewind the clock more than 60 years and listen to a warning from someone you'd think would know a thing or two about the military.
In his last speech as president, Dwight D. Eisenhower, and remember, this is the 5-star general who commanded all the Allied forces in World War II, warned America about a new power he saw rising. He called it the military-industrial complex.
What he was talking about was this permanent and frankly kind of cozy relationship between the Pentagon and the giant defense companies that sell it weapons. He was worried this alliance would get so powerful that it would have unwarranted influence and actually start to threaten our democracy.
And one of the clearest ways this influence works today is through something people call the revolving door. Here's how it works. A top official oversees these huge defense contracts. Then they retire from public service. And pretty much the next day, they take a cushy, high-paying job with one of the very defense companies they used to oversee. It's a pretty clear conflict of interest, right? And we are not talking about a few isolated cases here. A recent analysis found 672 instances of this happening. Think about that. You have hundreds of people moving from regulating an industry to cashing in on it. The lines between serving the public and making a private profit get really, really blurry. So, when you put it all together, the failed audits, the billions in waste, this whole revolving door system, it all leads to one final, and I think the most important question. What's the real cost of all this? Because it's not just about the money we've lost, it's about what we could have had instead.
There's a term for this in economics. It's called opportunity cost, and it's actually a pretty simple idea. It's the cost of the road not taken. Every time we choose to spend $1 billion on a weapons program that doesn't work, we're also choosing not to spend that $1 billion on something else, like healthcare or education or fixing our roads.
Let's make this really concrete. Remember that $30 billion little crappy shit program? That money could have funded the entire childcare block grant for nearly 3 years. It could have paid for that vital funding boost for medical research at the NIH 14 times over. It could have funded the entire Head Start program twice. This right here, this is the tale of two budgets.
And that leaves us with this final thought. When we talk about national security, are we just counting the planes and the ships? Or should we also be counting the cost of what we lose? The cures we don't find, the kids who don't get a head start, the public trust that's lost to waste. Maybe that's all part of the true cost of our national defense, too.